Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. I had just got out of the shower when my mobile phone rang. Cursing, I wrapped a towel around myself and hurried into the bedroom to grab it from the dresser. Darlene had already gone to do her Christmas shopping, and we were supposed to meet in the counselor's office later. Before I could say hello, a cheerful male voice rang out. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said angrily. There was a gasp, then 2 or 3 seconds of complete silence, and then the click of the disconnector. Stunned, I looked at the phone. What the hell was that? After a moment, I realized I was holding Darlene's phone, not mine. They looked the same, but mine had a cracked screen, and the one I had didn't. She must have taken the wrong phone when she went to the door. But why would someone call her? Oh no, was she really having an affair? It seemed like it. Shocked, I hung up the phone, went back to the bathroom, and dried myself while my mind raced. All I could think was, this can't be real. Darlene and I have been married for 6 years. We decided not to have kids, and the last few months have been tough. We still got along, and she still loved me, but she wasn't interested in being intimate anymore. From 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes on her initiative, we went down to 1 or 2 times a month, and then only at my insistence. And when we did make love, she was passive and unenthusiastic, not the passionate and enthusiastic partner she was at the beginning of our marriage. We have talked about this problem over and over again. Darlene kept saying that there was nothing special about it, that she was just tired, too busy at work, blah blah. But nothing has changed in her work. No major projects, no terrible deadlines, no promotions. Every time I brought up the subject, Darlene replied that she felt better and sometimes we made love that night. But soon it all came down to the same thing. I asked, she denied. By the end of September I got tired of it, and that evening after dinner I sat her down on the couch. "Darlene, I love you, but I'm not ready to go on like this. I don't want to live the rest of my life without love. You used to like making love to me, but now obviously you don't. Something has to change, otherwise I'll ask for a divorce." She looked at me, completely stunned. "Divorce? Dear God, isn't this too radical? Darlene, do you understand how serious this is?" I needed to know. We've had 3 quick relationships in the past 3 months, and we've been together once. That's 4 times since July 1st, and during that time you've said no 18 times. I can't keep living like this. She looked down, clearly uneasy. She glanced at me cautiously, and I went on. "Firstly, I want you to go to Dr. Evans for a full checkup to make sure there are no physical issues. And secondly, I think we should start seeing a marriage counselor." A marriage counselor? But we didn't do anything wrong. No, they did. Are you listening to me, Darlene? We practically live together as brother and sister. Whether you want to admit it or not, something went wrong and we'll either try to fix it or I'll leave. There was a long argument. Darlene cried, but I was adamant and eventually got my way. She met with Dr. Evans, who confirmed that she was perfectly healthy, and we started going once a week to Eileen Archer, a consultant recommended by our friends Brad and Allison, who worked with her a few years ago. We consulted for about 2 months and everything was going well, or so it seemed to me. We talked a lot about our relationship, each other's work, the families we grew up in, and what our parents' marriages were like. Some of it seemed boring or inappropriate, but Eileen was sure that we were making progress, even if our bedroom life hadn't improved. So far, we've talked more about relationships and getting out of bed than making love. Eileen's motto for me was, be patient, and for both of us, be honest with yourself and with your partner. Now, standing in the bedroom and looking at Darlene's phone as if a snake had crawled out of it, I was thinking, did I just discover the real reason why she doesn't want to sleep with me anymore? Is it really that simple? I was replaced. Did someone else come and play the role of a traditional husband? As far as I could tell, nothing had changed in Darlene's schedule. She didn't work late, go on strange shopping trips or outings with friends, come home looking flushed and messy, or rush to the shower right away. But that doesn't mean she didn't sleep with someone else. She just did it carefully. I picked up the phone and checked the calls she received, and I was surprised to see there was only one. It was the one I had just answered. The caller was listed as CM. I pressed reply and waited for the signal. Surprisingly, the guy didn't answer, and the call went to voicemail. "This is Chris Mason. Leave a message, and I'll call you back. Have a nice day." I hung up the phone. I recognized the name. He was another employee of the brokerage firm where Darlene worked, but in a different department. She mentioned him a couple of times, but I've never met him. I examined Darlene's phone carefully. Not only all previous received calls were deleted, but also the lists of missed and sent calls. Who could have taken the time to delete all this? Darlene was obviously covering her tracks. I went to the office and looked at the mobile and home phone bills for the last few months. Darlene was paying the bills, so I had no reason to look for them. I found all the bills for the home phone in the desk, but the search did not reveal a single call from Chris Mason, at least from his mobile. But there are no records of mobile phone calls in the last 8 months. I looked at the checkbook. All the mobile phone bills had been paid, so Darlene must have hidden or thrown away the receipts, no doubt because they listed calls to Chris Mason. I arrived at Eileen's office about 20 minutes early. Darlene's car wasn't in the parking lot yet, so I sat down and thought for a while. If I'm right, if Darlene cheated on me with Chris Mason or someone else, our marriage is over. She may love me, but it's not worth a damn if she spreads her legs for someone else. I suppose she loved me, otherwise why would she want to stay together? Why would I see a counselor unless she's lying to both the counselor and me? But if she thought she could deceive me, well, she's going to find out she was wrong. At first, I thought I'd meet Darlene at Eileen's office today, tell her about the call from Chris, and demand an explanation. But then I realized that's not enough. I needed evidence, and then I wanted to effectively end our marriage by exposing Darlene's lies. I was angry and hurt, and she had to face the consequences of her actions. Plus, I had a better plan for our final confrontation than Eileen's office. So we went there, and after a while, Darlene showed up, kissed me, and we started the session. Eileen began talking about the usual stuff, how we handle arguments in our relationship, our different styles, based on our experiences and how our parents argued, and so on. I played along, looked thoughtful and serious, tried to give believable answers, and managed not to clench my teeth too much. That damn bastard. I wanted to grab her by the throat and strangle her in front of Eileen. Towards the end of the session, Eileen gave me a chance to get a good reason to tease her, even if only slightly. She said something like, I know it's hard for both of you, but we are starting to learn about your marriage, what each of you expects from it, and your honesty creates an atmosphere in which we can move from common topics to productive discussion of your problems. I stepped in to say, thank you for saying that, Eileen. It was difficult for me at times, but I tried to be completely honest and open. It seems like this is the only way to achieve something. Darlene, would you say the same is true for you? I watched as she blushed slightly and avoided my gaze. Instead, she looked at Eileen, nodded, and said, that's right, Alan. I feel the same way. I wondered if Eileen had noticed Darlene's obvious discomfort. She didn't comment on it in any way, but it seemed to me that she stared at Darlene for a minute or two. After the session, we went across the street to a diner to have a quick lunch. When she went to the ladies' room, I quickly took out her mobile phone from her purse and put it in my pocket. Then I went outside to buy a newspaper from a vending machine, and while I was there, I turned off Darlene's phone, wrapped it in newspaper, and put it at the bottom of the trash can. I figured Chris Mason would be desperate to get in touch with Darlene and tell her what had happened. So I wanted to make sure he didn't have a chance to get to her. At lunch, Darlene and I talked about nothing, mostly about her shopping and what gifts we would need the next day when we went to her parents' for Christmas dinner. We made a list of necessity and then went to a row of crowded shops to buy the last few things. I was amazed at my ability to keep my mouth shut, to pretend to be nice when all I wanted to do was hit her. But either I was a better actor than I thought, or Darlene was too distracted to notice something was wrong. At home during dinner, the wired phone rang 3 times, and each time I jumped up to answer it. The first 2 times, there was just silence. For the 3rd time, about 20 minutes later, a female voice that I had never heard before asked, can I talk to Darlene, please? I wondered if Chris, in desperation, had asked a friend to give Darlene a message from him and said, may I ask who's calling? The voice answered, Iris, from work. Smiling to myself, I said, what's the matter? She was at a loss. There was a moment's silence, and then she said, oh, that. Well, there's an account that we're both working on, and I have a few questions about it. On Christmas Eve, I said, I'm afraid she can't come to the phone right now, but I'll leave you a message. Have a nice evening. He hung up the phone with a smile. Darlene looked at me blankly when I returned, and I said, some woman is conducting a survey. Imagine she calls on Christmas Eve. It was obvious that Darlene was a little worried. She waited for a few minutes, then casually went into another room, no doubt to check her cell phone. She came back with her purse and looked worried. Darling, do you know where my mobile phone might be? I remember taking it from the dresser this morning when I left. Oh, Darlene, I don't know where it could be. Did you check your wallet? Did you look outside the car? Maybe you left it somewhere at the mall. She searched the car, but didn't find it, and I just sat there and smiled. Eventually, she gave up, and I promised to get her a new one for the new year. But secretly, I doubted I would. I was sure her next move would be to try calling Chris if she could get rid of me for even a few minutes. Throughout the evening, I noticed Darlene watching me from the corner of her eye several times. I wondered if she was hoping for a chance to get to the phone. Finally, she said, honey, I'm a little tired. I'm going upstairs and watch TV, okay? Of course, Darlene, I replied. Sounds great. I'll just put the dishes in the sink and we'll go together. She smiled at me, but I could see that she was upset. An hour later, she asked me to check if there were any bins on the side of the road. When I reminded her that tomorrow was Christmas and there would be no garbage collection, she turned away with obvious disappointment. When we went to bed, she didn't have time to call anyone. On Christmas morning, I got up early, had breakfast while Darlene was sleeping, and made some preparations. Then I went into the bedroom and gently woke her up. Good morning, dear. Merry Christmas. I gave her a fake smile. There is coffee in the kitchen. I'm off. I'll see you at your parents' later. She sat down awkwardly. It's only 8:30, Alan. Where are you going? I smiled again. I need to pick up a present for you at the last minute, dear. But don't worry. I'll see you there at 2. She protested. Aren't all the shops closed today? And can't I come home and pick her up later? But I was already on my way to the door to kiss her. At 8:45 a.m., I knocked on Chris Mason's door, finding his address in Darlene's office book. I expected him to be in town today, as he mentioned that he was looking forward to meeting Darlene the next day. When he opened the door, he was wearing a bathrobe and looked sleepy. A tall, good-looking guy, about 25 or so. Yes, what the? He fell silent and retired to his living room, and I went in and quickly closed the door behind me. I aimed the Hammerly 208 degrees Celsius air pistol straight at his chest. It wasn't very dangerous. I only used it for practicing at close range, but Mason didn't know that. He looked really frightened. Let me introduce myself, Chris. I'm Alan Rohatyn, Darlene's husband and your current partner. His eyes got wide, and he took another step back. Hey, calm down, okay? I don't know what you think I am. Anyway, Chris, you called yesterday and asked me to spend the night with you. Do you really think that I don't see what's going on? That's what's going to happen. We'll sit here in your living room and have a nice chat. If I don't get the answers I need, I'll shoot you in the balls once or twice and leave you bleeding. If you decide to be more honest, after a while we will visit people I know and talk to them, and then I will leave you to live your life. Do you understand? He looked at me warily and nodded his head slightly. All I have to do is talk to you. I nodded. Yes, and I'll leave you alone. It sucks to be shot at, doesn't it? Chris and I talked for a while, and he told me everything I wanted to know. Then I watched as he took his clothes and took them to the bathroom to take a shower and get dressed. After that, he made us sandwiches in his kitchen and we ate, with me holding him at gunpoint the whole time. We didn't talk much and that was good for me. At 10:45 we went outside and got into my car. I gave Chris the address and told him to drive the car and get in the back with a gun in his hand. When we arrived at Darlene's parents' house, I told Chris to park 4 doors away so they wouldn't see my car. I noticed that Darlene's car was already there, as was her sister Barbara's and her husband's car. But I wanted to make an impressive entrance, so we sat and waited until 12:30, until I dropped Chris out of the car and walked him to their entrance. No more games now, do you understand, Chris? I asked. Do you remember the deal? We come in, I make some introductory remarks, you tell your story, and I leave. And you'll keep your testicles. I'll have a gun in my pocket, but it'll fly out in less than a second if you try to do something. He looked somewhere between awkward and terrified. Don't worry, man, I'll play like you said. When we rang the doorbell, Darlene's mom, Sarah, answered it. Her friendly smile turned to confusion when she saw Chris. Hi, Alan. Who is it? Hi, Sarah. Merry Christmas, I greeted, giving her a kiss on the cheek as we walked into the foyer. This is Chris. He's just stopping by for a few minutes. Ignoring her confusion, I took Chris by the hand and led him straight into the dining room, where the family was getting ready to eat. It seemed they were going to start without me. Merry Christmas, everyone, I exclaimed with a cheerful smile, glancing at their surprised faces. Darlene's father, Tom, her sister, Barbara, her husband, Mark, and their 2 boys, Teddy and Ben, were all there. Darlene was sitting a bit apart from the rest. Everyone else had a vague but content, even expectant look on their faces. What a pleasant surprise, they thought. An additional guest. But Darlene looked as pale as a ghost. Her mouth opened a few inches, and I thought she was going to faint. That's it. It's Chris. He's a colleague of Darlene's and wants to tell us a little story. Come on, Chris. Darlene got to her feet. No, Alan, it's not. I quickly interrupted her. It's okay, Darlene. I think everyone should hear this. She took a few quick steps towards the door, but I grabbed her arm and hugged her tightly. Come on, Chris. Darlene tried to pull away from me, saying, No, Chris, don't. I put my free hand over her mouth to shut her up while her parents looked on in complete amazement. Chris reluctantly began to speak. Darlene and I had an affair. It started in April and has been going on ever since. Darlene's family gasped, stared at Chris, then at Darlene and me. After a long pause, Barbara picked up Teddy and Ben from their seats and took them to the living room, where she turned on the TV. Then she came back inside and closed the door. "Go ahead, Chris," I said with a smile. "We meet at work. There are a couple of massage rooms in the gym with closed doors. We do this about twice a week at different times so no one notices. We work on different floors of the building so no one realizes we leave at the same time. There are showers where we clean up afterward." Darlene kept struggling with me. She even tried to bite my hand, but I held her tightly. "So, Chris," I said, "what exactly were you two doing together? Please be specific." He didn't meet my gaze. "Mostly us. We made love. Sometimes Darlene makes me feel really good to start with, and she likes it." I liked the look of horror on Darlene's mother's face. Darlene stopped struggling with me, and I took my hand away from her mouth. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face. "And what was it like sleeping with Darlene?" I asked politely. I knew what his answer would be. I let him practice a few times to make it work. She's very hot. She is always very proactive. She tightens her hips, winks at me, especially when she's about to ejaculate. To my surprise, Darlene's relatives did not budge. I expected one of them to try to stop her. "Did she ever talk about me?" I asked. "Sometimes. She says she loves you, but she won't stop sleeping with me. The only male organ I need is yours," she told me many times. "When were you planning to meet again?" "Tomorrow." She said she needed to work in the office. We planned to spend about 3 hours together. We hoped we'd have more time this time. He asked, "How much longer do you think this plan will last?" "Probably a few more weeks," I replied. I wanted to keep going, but Darlene insisted we stop. She said you wanted to go to counseling because your sex life was suffering, and she was worried you'd find out what was happening. She said New Year's Eve would be the day you'd break up with me, but then she laughed and said it might take a few more weeks to finish the job. There was silence in the room. Darlene's family watched in shock as everything unfolded. It was just me, Darlene, and Chris. Everyone was standing. Darlene was sobbing, covering her face with her hands and not trying to say anything. I went over to Tom, took his hand and shook it. "Bye, Tom. I loved being your son-in-law. You and Sarah are good people and deserved a better daughter than this cheater. Of course, as a husband, I deserved better than her." I went up to Sarah, kissed her on the cheek and said, "Bye, Sarah. I'm sorry I can't stay for lunch. It might be a little awkward." Darlene fell to the floor. She was still crying, just sitting with her face in her hands. I leaned over to her and said, "Don't come home today, Darlene. In the morning, your things will be collected near the garage and I will change the locks. And don't try, I repeat, don't try to talk to me. You're not going to say anything I want to hear." She looked up at me, lines of dripping mascara running down her face. "Alan, dear, I said no." Without saying another word, I turned to the table, smiled and headed for the door, waving to everyone. Chris was smart enough not to ask me for a ride home. Second story, I found my wife with my brother. This all happened 7 hours ago. I haven't slept since. Here's a long story short. I'm military and live on a military installation. Me and my wife have been married just over 2 years. We just had a son and he is 3 months old. My wife has this terrible drinking problem. If she drinks liquor of any kind, she's like a demon. Like something is mentally wrong with her when she drinks. She's had this problem ever since we have gotten together. But over time it has just gotten so much worse. She will break TVs, punch me, kick me, slap me, force sex and then beat me again until she passes out on the floor and pisses herself. One time she went to the neighbor's house around 2 a.m. and woke them up to try and make friends. They called the police on her. Just an example of the nightmare she becomes while drinking. I refused to buy her liquor, but occasionally if she could find a way to get liquor she would. And there's no way to stop her from drinking. After I finished my first job contract, we moved to a new place. I asked my brother to come live with us and pay rent so he could grow up and leave our mother's house. I thought it would help him learn to be responsible. He's not really successful, but he got a job and paid rent on time. I only asked him to pay half of what it costs him to live here so he could save money to move out and start his own life. He's been living with us for a year now. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, he got fired. He also drinks a lot and says he needs to drink to sleep because he has trouble sleeping. Usually, the three of us got along well. We played board games, went disc golfing, and cooked for each other. But lately, she's been spending time with him in his room. I talked to both of them about the issues. I have threatened divorce if she kept drinking, and things were fine again after one shitty night. Last night she had a bottle of cheap wine, which is usually fine. We had sex and then she took a bath at around 1 a.m. I fell asleep while she was in there, only to wake up to my son screaming 2 hours later. I take care of him and put him to sleep. She's nowhere to be found. Walk into my brother's room and boom, there she is, in his arms and on his chest. I can't feel, I can't think, I can't breathe. I don't know what to do. I kicked my brother out without letting him grab anything. I told him to fucking run. And he did. She won't stop crying. My son won't stop crying. And I'm in a world of pain. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.